Welcome back to the Scotti-BYTE channel, and this is Scott. Well, the YouTube algorithm has said that I need to employ the technique of attaining more subscribers through cute cat videos. So I want to introduce you here to Bam Bam. He's a new addition to the family, and he is like a solid purr monster here. I'm telling you what. It is just amazing. I thought about making this video about the cat command, but apparently there are no commands that cats actually will listen to. So that being said, let's get into today's video. And so today's subject is Linux desktop environments. Different Linux desktop environments provide window managers, desktop managers, menus, and file managers. In reality, folks that distro hop provide or search for mostly a different desktop look and feel, and really you can achieve that yourself. So Linux is basically a kernel with added elements that are all your choice, and one example of that would be Arch Linux. So we're going to look at taking an Incus container and adding various desktops to it on an Ubuntu base operating system. I want to start out by saying that we're going to begin with creating a container as opposed to an Incus virtual machine. So virtual machines normally have desktops, whereas Incus containers or LXD containers look a bit more like server images simply because they don't have any desktop environment associated with them. So I'm starting or have started here in Ubuntu 24.04 instance. I'm calling it test. I'm setting boot.autostart equals to true, and I'm including both the default profile and the bridge profile simply to offer this on my main LAN. Let's begin by entering our new container with an Incus shell on test. And the first thing we want to do is an apt update &apt upgrade -y to make sure that we've upgraded all the repositories and taken all of the operating system upgrades. And as you can see here, it grabbed a couple of those. I'm now going to add myself a user account with an add user Scott. I'm going to give Scott a password. And then I'm going to go ahead and put Scott in the user group with the user mod -a G sudo Scott. Next, I'm going to SU over to the Scott account, and now I'm logged in as user Scott. Now we're going to install some dependencies for this project, and those are taskcell, which is the selector that allows us to install desktop environments, the nano editor just because it's usually handy for some things, net-tools for our networking options just so we can see our network configuration easily, OpenSSH server, which will allow us to connect into our system remotely if so required, and then XRDP and Xorg RDP, which are the components that are going to be required in order to be able to connect to our desktop environment in the Incus container remotely. And here, with any luck, I'll get my password correct. And then it says, do you want to continue? As you can see, we have a long list of elements to be installed, and this is going to require some time. Now that I've installed the essential components, one of the first things that I discovered that I had to do was to go off and change the protections on a couple of the RDP files. So here I'm making a change to the RDP cert file, and then over here the RDP key. And then finally I'm changing the ownership over to the RDP account for the RDP key. And I discovered I had to do all three of those to make RDP work correctly, at least under Ubuntu 24.04. And then finally, I restart the XRDP service. At this point, we're going to go ahead and install some desktops with the command sudo task cell. And this brings up the task cell program. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the Debian desktop environment, the GNOME desktop environment, XFCE, KDE Plasma, Cinnamon, Mate, LXDE, and LXQT, and then tab down to the OK and hit enter. And this installation process will go on for quite some time to install all of these desktop environments. During the course of the installation of the desktop environment, you'll be presented a question about display managers and which display manager you'd like. The display manager handles how you end up logging into the computer, and so I'll go ahead and just choose GDM3 as the default. LightDM is another choice, and I've rarely used SDDM. So I'll go ahead and hit OK on this, and the installation will continue. Now that we've installed all of the desktop environments, we can go ahead and execute a command called sudo update-alternatives-config x-session-manager. And once we provide our sudo password, we have the list of all of the session managers that we've installed. I'm going to go ahead here and specify number 1, which is the Cinnamon environment that normally comes with Linux Mint. And so it's gone ahead and updated that. Before I can actually get XRDP to operate correctly, I want to go ahead and edit the start WM or start window manager script. And once I go in to edit this file, I'm going to scroll down to right before the test command there, and I'm going to paste in the following lines. And I guess I don't really want to get this test line in here after all. I guess I double copied that in my notes. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of both of those. So basically I have this unset dbus session command and this unset xdg runtime directory, and then the profile command. So at this point I'll do a Control-O and enter to save the file out, and a Control-X to exit the nano editor. To test out our new desktop environment, the Cinnamon desktop, which is running inside of this container, I'm going to exit the container, exit the root account, and I'm back to my desktop machine. We're going to use the X-Free RDP client to connect to the container, and so from my desktop I'm doing a sudo apt install free rdp2-x11. I go ahead and say yes to perform the install, and once it completes the install I should be able to make a connection. Just as a reminder, I'm going to go ahead and do an Incus list, and my test container is running at the address 172.16.1.231. And so I'm going to execute the command xfreerdp/u:scott for the username Scott, and then v: and the address of the machine that we've just found here, and then /f for full screen. I hit enter, and it launches XRDP, fills in my username of Scott, and I'm typing in the password for my container. And here it logs in to the Cinnamon desktop. On the Cinnamon desktop, of course, I can click on the menu option, and then I can go ahead and click on the Files option, and we can see here that we are running Nemo, which is the default file manager for a Cinnamon desktop. I want to remind you here that we're connected to an Incus container and not an Incus virtual machine, and so we have a much lower utilization of resources because we're sharing the host kernel as we do with other Incus containers. So here I'm going to go ahead and log out, and that goes ahead and returns me back to my desktop machine, and we've exited the X-Free RDP client. In order to change the desktop environment, I'm going to go ahead and need to do an Incus shell back into the test container, and once I'm there, I can go ahead and execute the sudo update alternatives command again and change our entry. So right now we're at the Cinnamon desktop environment, and the next desktop environment we're going to change is to Mate, which is number 4 here. And so then I can go ahead and exit out of the container and then go back and perform the X-Free RDP with the Scott username back to the same address of the container, and I say go full screen. This goes ahead and brings up the interface. I type in my password, and this time we will get a Mate. So it looks as though we have an error about the applet not being correctly loaded, but that's fine. That's something that we can fix later on. But as you can see here, we're clearly in a Mate menu. Now from here, we can go ahead and go up to the Mate menu and then click the exit or log out, and I tell it to go ahead and log out from here. So now we have to go back into the shell again, and this time we're going to execute the update alternatives file once again, and from Mate we're going to go ahead and switch over to the GNOME desktop, which is going to be number 2. And now I exit back out, and I go ahead and do another X-Free RDP. I go ahead and type in my password, and this time we should be at the GNOME desktop. And sure enough, there is a standard GNOME desktop. And of course, it's coming up and giving us our usual prompts, start using Ubuntu, and now as you can see here, we can click up there and we have our app drawer and we have all of our other options. So I can click up here and tell it that I want to go ahead and log out. Now that we're back at my desktop terminal, I'm going to go ahead and do another Incus shell over to test and then execute sudo update-alternatives once again. And this time, I'm going to go ahead and choose the XFCE option, which is number 9. We go ahead and do that. We exit out, and then we go ahead and do an X-Free RDP. It comes back up. We type in my password, and we should be in an XFCE session. And sure enough, we're in XFCE, which is an extremely lightweight desktop and one that is really great if you have a low resource environment. So I go ahead and log out of this one, and again back to my desktop terminal prompt. Once again, let's go ahead and Incus shell over to test and then fire up the update-alternatives, and this time let's choose number 6 for the LXDE desktop environment. I go ahead and exit back out of the shell and do an X-Free RDP once again, and this time I type in my password as I have all along, and now we're in the LXDE environment here, and you can see our menu and all of our options. I'll go ahead and log out of it, and we're back to the terminal. This time, let's go ahead and connect back into the shell and execute the update alternatives once again. And this time, let's choose number 8, which is for the KDE Plasma environment. And now we'll go ahead and exit out again. and we'll do an X-free RDP, and then we'll provide our password. And once we do, we'll come into a Plasma environment, which is a little bit more heavy duty, but it should come up with any luck. And there we go. It seems like it finally provided me a logon, but it's asking me for the password again. I'll go ahead and enter my password, and it's asking me for the password again. Let's see if we can get in, and sure enough we do. Sometimes the logins are a little bit different, and that's related to some of the keychain options. But here we have a KDE Plasma desktop environment, and there's our menu, and we're able to log out from here and again go back to the terminal prompt. And let's go ahead and go back into the shell for test, and then execute the update alternatives once again. And this time, let's go into LXDE. No, we did LXDE. Let's do LXQT, and LXQT is number 7. So we execute number 7. We exit out back to the terminal, and we do our X-free RDP. And then we type in our password. And here we are. Up here it says, please select your default window manager. And then normally with LXQT, it's generally going to be Muffin. And so I'll go ahead and open that. And there we are with the LXQT desktop environment. And now let's go ahead and log off of LXQT, and we do that by clicking the log out option and saying yes, go ahead and log out. So as you've seen, after we install TaskCell and select all of the appropriate desktops, and then we can go into update-alternatives, it'll allow you to switch between the installed desktops. You could also install the Deepin desktop environment as well as the Elementary OS environment. However, they work on Ubuntu 22.04, and here my container was Ubuntu 24.04, so we didn't have that option. And if you preferred the default Ubuntu desktop environment, you could just do a apt install Ubuntu-desktop, and you would get it. So in summary, we added a Cinnamon desktop, which is the Linux Mint default desktop. We added an Ubuntu Mate desktop, and we added the generic GNOME desktop, which is a lot like the Ubuntu default. And we also tried out the KDE, XFCE, LXDE, and the LXQT desktop environments. So desktops can be managed and added to any Linux distro, and they can change the look and feel of your distribution. Anyway, that's it for today. Please subscribe and like to the channel, and don't forget to hit that notification bell, and we'll see you next time.